Comedy will always be subjective. What you find funny won't always be funny to someone else. This is even more so the case for comedy anime and manga. These series appeal to weebs and weebs alone, and this is the reason I never actually recommend comedy anime to anyone I know. For example, I could probably go to a family dinner or a party with strangers and put on a skit from The Chappelle Show or Key and Peele, and while I could be wrong, I can assume that a few handful of people at that party will laugh. That's because not only are the jokes genuinely hilarious, but they appeal to a much more general audience. I can't go to my Thanksgiving dinner and just put on Prison School on the TV. My grandma will probably come back from the dead just to disown me. And I think Prison School is funny, it's just that you need to be an absolute degenerate to enjoy this series. I mean, let's be real. A normal member of society with a career, significant other, and plans for the future will just think this anime is for weirdos. And they're right, it's me, I'm weirdos. It's a shame because my favorite anime of all time is literally just like this. I think Konosuba is the funniest thing in the world, but between Megumi talking about erotic slime play and Darkness screaming out she wants to take 30 male orcs on but not in a fight, I hesitate to tell the cute girl working at the family diner that I'm a Konosuba fan as a first impression in fear of receiving a restraining order. With that being said, I think I finally found it. The ideal comedy manga. The comedy manga I'm comfortable recommending because I'm confident most people will enjoy it. And while it is extremely new with only a couple chapters out, you can tell this manga will be going places. And the manga I'm talking about is called shoten. Remember Bakuman, the story that followed the journey and career of two people struggling to make it as mangaka in the brutal world that is the manga industry? Well, Bakuman but comedians perfectly describes newly released comedy manga shoten. It even has the same artist working on it. It has the same formula, following a duo working together pursuing their dream while also having a main heroine for the protagonist to try and impress when he gets famous enough. This manga is fascinating to me because while it follows the adventures of aspiring future comedians, it's not really a comedy manga per se. When I think of funny comedy anime and manga, some of the series that comes to mind are Konosuba, Disastrous Life of Saki, Prison School, and Pop Team Epic. You know, if you have the humor of someone that is literally only able to laugh at memes online, you might think this anime is funny. But what all of those series have in common is that they all have the same flow. They're overloaded with jokes. It's punchline into joke, followed by punchline into joke, and maybe a few sprinkles of heartwarming moments in between. They present a simple setting and let you know the types of jokes that the series is going to make, all within a matter of minutes in the first episode. As someone who loves Konosuba to death, if you didn't laugh at anything in the first episode, you probably won't end up liking the anime. The first episode actually does a fantastic job of letting the viewer know the whole vibe of the entire series, all within the first episode, whether you end up liking it or not. Pretty much all comedy manga and anime have very little story and progression in them. None of these characters are going to end up doing a complete 180 in their personalities by the end of the story. The first impression you have of them pretty much sums up their entire personality for the rest of the series. I think pretty much every character in a comedy series is one-dimensional for the most part. The only exception to the rule is Gintama, which is in this weird middle ground of half comedy, half shonen, and I think it ends up leaning more towards the shonen side. As hilarious as scenes like Gintoki stuck in a public stall with no toilet paper are, they also have arcs in the series with hype action and some seriously heavy tones in the series, oftentimes just having multiple episodes go by without any attempt at comedy being made when something important to the plot is happening. Most of the pure comedy anime and manga that come to mind have very little character growth, non-existent story, and are all very fast-paced with their jokes, and that's just the nature of the genre. We come for the characters and the jokes, no one cares about plot, go watch something else for that. None of that defeating the Demon King stuff matters, skip over all that lore crap, I'm just trying to see Darkness get hit with some cabbages. And comedy anime and manga are fine just like this, but this is where shoten differs. In shoten, the characters don't feel one-dimensional at all. Extremely early on, you can just tell they're going to grow and develop as the story progresses. They do everything right in the first chapter, get you to care about the characters immediately, establish a goal, and have funny jokes to boot. But not only do they establish a goal to work towards early on, but every new chapter and the actions the characters make feel like they're actually actively working towards that goal. The story doesn't take a backseat or anything in this series. It really does feel like a new Pokemon. The story of this manga is really a story about learning to gain self-confidence and pursuing a dream that might be impossible while also being pretty funny on top of all that. The story follows this young boy, Azumichi, who failed to make the girl he liked laugh. So he uses this trauma and spends the next 2 years studying comedy and finds out that he has a lot of passion for comedy and is actually pretty funny himself. I can relate to this heavy because I too wanted to be a stand-up comedian when I was growing up. It used to be a dream I had as a kid and I used to think I was pretty funny. But then, I tried doing stand-up and bombed on stage a couple of times and realized I'm not that funny. So I decided to give up and make anime videos instead, because being funny or being interesting isn't a requirement in this type of field, and I'm all the more happy for it. I have no fear of uploading a video that will get 3 views, getting mass disliked, or getting ratioed online, because performing on stage and having no one give you a reaction is what I would describe as my true cringe, and now I can power through anything. But Shoha Shoten is thankfully both funny and interesting. In Shoha Shoten, a lot of the jokes in the series feel like they take a backseat to the overall plot and character progression that is going on. It's not constant punchline into joke like most series, and it's not like I'm not laughing at the jokes, it's just that the manga will sometimes go 10 or so pages without even telling a joke. They'll just start presenting you with an info dump on the character's backstory, or start breaking down and explaining how the range of a joke works, and it's all very interesting. I love the pacing, it all feels so natural. I think the important thing here is the manga isn't being a tryhard with its comedy. It's just telling a story, and if you happen to laugh, that's the cherry on top. It's probably doing what it's intended to do because it actually reminds me a ton about real life stand-up comedy more so than comedy manga. I love Konosuba because for the entire runtime of 20 minutes, I'm sitting there giggling at everything that's happening on screen because the pacing is to constantly throw jokes in your face. However, I'm never really able to get that true laughter where my sides hurt and I can barely breathe from Konosuba. I'm able to get that type of laughter from watching my favorite stand-up comedy routines though, and that's because of one key factor. That being the build-up to the joke. Some of the greatest comedians of all time are obviously funny, that's literally what it says on the job description, but where their actual talent lies is their storytelling. Truly great comedians manage to engage you in their storytelling. They paint a picture in your head that you can easily imagine, almost like a Rakugo performance. Some of the funniest jokes I've ever heard in my life were me just listening to someone tell a story for a few minutes, because what they do is build and build until it's finally time to tell that joke. And when they finally drop that punchline on you, it ends up being the funniest thing in the world. That's when they go for joke after joke until next thing you know you're sitting there struggling to breathe. And I'm only able to get that reaction from the storytelling and build up that led up to the joke. And this is going to sound weird and out of left field coming from someone making a video praising this manga, but I don't even find Shoha Shoten that funny. I'll go on record and say I think other series like Konosuba and Prison School got more laughs out of me. I didn't have high hopes for this series when first starting out. Partly due to the fact that I never really understood the whole Japanese comedy duo routine they have. This is probably because of cultural differences, but I never really thought the straight man and funny man routine was that funny. And that's fine, because this comedy manga's real strength lies in its storytelling and presentation. They explain how different types of comedy have different ranges, and they do a fantastic job of portraying how it actually feels to present. A great example is the first skit the duo does for their school. They spend a few pages on talking, setting up the joke to create a setting of a teacher-student performance, much like, again, a Rakugo performance. They show glances at the crowd sitting there, paying attention, occasionally chuckling. They build up, and then they finally drop that first big joke that, in all honesty, wasn't special with a simple setup, and they just show the crowd absolutely exploding in laughter, represented by a tidal wave. After that, they just start firing joke after joke after joke, and the crowd is just eating it up, and as someone who's been in that position a handful of times, I'm just like, holy shit, they get it. They understand how stand-up comedy works. I don't think I've seen stand-up comedy portrayed this well in fiction, like, ever. I knew this manga was going to be special by chapter 2. One of my favorite parts early on is when the duo is tasked with making the protagonist's family laugh. They never laugh at anything, so the duo makes skits to get each of them individually to laugh. And these jokes are just downright awful. No one reading this is laughing, but they still manage to get his family to laugh, because the reason they're laughing is because the style of comedy is akin to an inside joke with friends. The series' knowledge on comedy is truly masterful. They break it down to a science that's easily digestible to where even if you never really thought about comedy like that before, you can comprehend the themes that are being presented. The series understands how range works very well. There's no such thing as a universal joke that everyone can laugh at. For example, I would literally burst into tears from laughing every time someone posts a picture of Sarah J and someone replies with a picture of Triple H. You might not think this is funny, and if you're a hardcore Sarah J fan, you probably just dislike this video. And that's how range works, and this series gets that. The protagonists pick a teacher and student skit because they're performing at a school. They pick weird skits where only one person will think it's funny because they know how to cater their jokes to their audience. The series understands how it's really difficult for comedians to reach a range where everyone thinks they're funny, and how it's so much more different from jokes that you and only your friends will laugh at. They even go over how comedy is for YouTubers, how you will think you're funny and your fans will think you're funny, but people who don't watch you probably won't think you're funny. It shows how difficult it can be to try and gain a new audience that will enjoy your type of content who's never heard of you before. And I think range is the series' biggest strength. It's got the funny jokes and the funny faces, it's got the likable characters and really good presentation. Even if you hate comedy manga, I feel like just about everyone can find something to like in this series, and that's why I'm comfortable recommending it to just about anyone, even someone's grandma. None of the jokes are crude, they're all appropriate. It's a manga that's rated E for everyone. I'm usually not one to recommend something based on first impressions, I'm always afraid of something aging poorly. But judging from the first few chapters, you can just tell this is gonna be a classic. I definitely don't think this is the funniest thing in the world, and that's okay. Because regardless if you think this series is funny or not, simply put, it's just a really good, well-written and interesting manga that just about everyone can enjoy. And that's really what makes it the ideal comedy manga.